everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Yekemi Otaro, as you know, and today I've got the lovely Fiona Feldermann with me. She is Managing Director over at McFelder Translations, and we've been working together for a couple of years now, and I'm absolutely delighted to have her on the show today. If you are listening, do feel free to go ahead and put in the chat that you're listening. Tell us where you're listening from, and that'll be exciting. And if you've got questions as we go along, do put that in the chat and we'll answer them as quickly as we can. By way of introduction, I am Yekemi Otaro, and I'm one of the co-founding directors over at Dukaru. We're based in Aberdeen in Scotland, and I do these lives usually every Thursday. I always say it's every Thursday, but it's more like 2 or 3 Thursdays a month. I always prefer to have, an inspiring business leader or someone doing remarkable things in the community to bring to you. So I'm absolutely delighted. I can see we've got a couple of people putting in the chats that they're listening. So thank you so much for that. Hi, Fiona. Good to have you here. Tell us a bit more about what you do right now at McFelder's Translations, and then we'll go back to your kind of career journey.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you very much for the invitation today and the opportunity. It's a real pleasure. As you said, I'm Managing Director at McFelder Translations, which is a small translation agency based in Girona in Spain. We specialise in technical translations and have a range of primarily business-to-business clients.
And are you based right now in the UK or in Spain? Are you sitting in Spain or in the UK right now?
No, I'm sitting in sunny Scotland. We relocated here for 6 months, but the team is very much based in Girona, and we'll be relocating back at the end of June. But the company is a Spanish limited company because my fellow company director, my husband, is Spanish, and that was why the company was founded in Spain in 2004.
I bet you're looking forward to going back. I mean, the weather must be complete opposites between what you had in Spain and what you've been having in Scotland. But I have to say, Scotland's been doing pretty well over the last couple of weeks. We've had some lovely sunshine and in between hailstones, but overall, it has had some lovely days. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's start at the beginning. And again, just a big welcome to everyone watching on LinkedIn, I can see, and a couple of people on YouTube as well. If you are on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to this channel. It means that you will get a notification every time we go live. So let's go back to the beginning. So tell us a little bit about your career journey, because I know you've got a PhD in chemistry and you're a scientist by background, but now you run this business which does translations for all sorts of companies. So tell us a little bit about your career journey from chemistry to what you do now.
Sure. Well, when I finished my PhD in chemistry, I went to Vancouver for 1 year and did a postdoctoral research in Vancouver at the University of British Columbia, which was fabulous. It was a wonderful place to be, and I wanted to do some research before I went into industry. When I finished at UBC, I moved back to Britain and I went to work for a company called Tioxide, which specialised in titanium dioxide pigments. And it was part of the ICI group of companies. Probably younger people wouldn't even know. The Imperial Chemical Industries, ICI, was a behemoth of the industry in those days. Titanium dioxide is a very important chemical used in, their big client was ICI Dulux paints for paints, and the division that I joined was a specialist division, and they used, it was like nanotechnology in those days, I suppose. It was very fine chemical grade of titanium dioxide that was used. There was 2 applications. One, it was in sunscreens as an alternative to organic UV absorbers, and the other one, it was used in more industrial applications. And I was tasked with doing product development and finding clients. So we were actually putting the fine titanium dioxide into polystyrene films and using it in food packaging, different applications like that. And it was a safer alternative to the organic UV absorbers. So that role, I was in that role for about 5 or 6 years, and it was really interesting because it was a European team that I worked with, and as well as doing product development, I was also tasked with doing business development in terms of sales and marketing, without any real formal training, just sort of, you can do that. And yeah, of course, never really sort of said, well, why would I, or I need training? We just sort of did it. But
Yeah.
it was really enjoyable. The production site was in Italy, in Tuscany. So we had to go out to Tuscany quite a lot, which was wonderful. And then from that business, I moved into BPB, another specialist sector, and I moved into gypsum division. And again, that was a specialty division within Europe. And the gypsum was used in a range of different applications, but the division that I worked for looked at a very fine top-end version of the gypsum rather than plasterboard. And that was used in dental plaster applications. It was used in the foundry sector for casting aluminium, lots of different applications for it. And again, it was a new product line, so I was tasked with business development, product development, marketing, things like that. And then from there, I went to an engineering company. I was about 1 year with the engineering company, and that was where I met my husband. And we both had wanted to start our own business, and we were enjoying the jobs we were in, but there was an excessive amount of travel. So 1 week I would be in Germany, another week Christian would be in Sweden for the entire week. And it was very difficult to coordinate where we were, apart from weekends. And then sometimes it would overrun because it wasn't worth traveling back, etc. So that was the reason that we decided to set up our own company. And we decided to set it up in Catalonia because Christian is Catalan, and he took me there and I loved it. And
yeah, and the rest is history.
Why not?
Amazing. Amazing. So for people listening, the translation industry, I suppose, is not an industry that we hear a lot about or know a lot about. And I know that you've got some fun facts about this industry. So going from what you were doing and coming into the translation industry, it must have been, I guess, a whole new world. But I can absolutely see why, whether you're, in a technical space or commercial space, communications is key. And as part of communications, you have to be able to translate, what it is that you're saying across the world. So first of all, give us some fun facts around translations that we might not actually know about the industry as a whole.
Okay, well, a fun fact is number of languages in the world. There's in the order of 7,000 languages and dialects in the world, which is quite interesting. Fake languages, I thought, was interesting as well. There are actually more than 200 fake languages. Why would a fake language exist? Well, they're invented for things like films, Lord of the Rings. The Klingon is the most famous language of all, I was sure, for all us Trekkie fans. The book that's most widely translated is the Holy Bible, and the world's most translated author, believe it or not, is Agatha Christie.
Oh,
so
really?
I thought there were some, yeah.
I really loved her books. I still, I think, have some really old ones at home, but absolutely love Agatha Christie. And you just reminded me, my sister and I had a language. We used to call it gibberish, because it literally was gibberish, but we had a language we used to speak, and a couple of my friends that picked up on it, and it was I just remembered that because my sister and I, we couldn't really speak our native language very well, and if we didn't want people to understand what we're saying, obviously we didn't want to speak English, and we weren't fluent with our native language, so we had this language called gibberish. Basically what it was, you change the vowels to a number, and then the consonants, you put an A. So if I wanted to say Fiona, you'd be fa, 4, 3, na, 1. Very complicated. Translate that. Amazing. So in terms of the work that you do, and sticking on the languages subject, what are the, I guess, most common translations that you're doing, and for what kind of companies, in terms of types of industries, are you finding that translations are crucial to how they communicate internally and with the world?
Well, I think the majority of clients are business to business sector, but it's not just marketing documentation we translate. You know, we translate websites, we translate also their manuals, their user guides, or contracts. We can be involved in things like mergers and acquisitions when those are going through. Before it hits the market, it's highly confidential. All of the documentation has to be translated if it's a foreign acquisition for an American company or a British company, and vice versa. So I would say that there's not any one typical day. And translation does also go into the video field as well. So we're not just stuck to hard copy documents or, you know, digital artwork. We're doing a ton of work in video at the moment, and that has been growing and growing over the years. But because of the pandemic, it's been enormous because clients have been so innovative, moving to video formats, having virtual reality events where video presentations are required, webinars which often have to be translated. So, you know, voiceover and subtitling has been huge this year, because I've just been so impressed with how dynamic our clients have been and how innovative, and they've just embraced the situation and found really wonderful ways to engage their clients, full stop, let alone without then adding the additional layer and difficulty of translation. So it's been amazing in that respect.
Yeah, I know that we were talking earlier, and the growth rate of this industry is in the region of about 3% year on year. What are some of the key kind of changes that you've seen in the industry over the years that you've been in it? What have you seen has changed in how companies approach translations and the impact that it has on growth, on especially diversification or new market entries?
Well, I think translation sometimes gets a bit of a poor reputation in terms of, I don't really know why, but, you know, in terms of, I think a lot of companies think that they can do it themselves. So, you know, oh, I've got someone in the department that knows a bit of Spanish, so we'll just let them get on with it. Whereas they will spend a lot of money on maybe a new website or new artwork, but the translation part can often be left behind by some clients, but not by all. I think the move also in the 20 years or almost 20 years that I've been working in the industry, there is a much bigger push now with the automated translation, with the neural machine translation, is developing rapidly. It's a machine learning technology, so the role of the translator is changing for certain types of translation, where in the past they would have translated and revised the document themselves. Now neural machine technology softwares are applied, and then the role of the translator is to do a revision and clean up any errors or mistranslations. So that's been a huge change. So the translator, the human translator, is not redundant, but their role is changing. Also, if the company is translating manuals, for example, and they're translating millions and millions of words in a certain language combination every year, then the machine technology is learning. So the quality of the translation improves with the more words that they translate. So it's really clever, actually, because you can train the software to not translate job titles, not translate business divisions. They can, you know, it's engineered and trained on what it should translate and what it shouldn't. And then as the translations are then revised by a human, and then the next time it does a revision, it does a translation, it has learned the preferred terms, the preferred way of expressing things. And this is an ongoing process. So it's not something that happens overnight, but with time, it improves and improves and improves. And that's going to be a trend that's not going to change. That's going to be here for good, for sure. But it doesn't mean to say human translators are redundant, because there are highly creative texts that they have to translate for, say, an advertising campaign or something that is 100% marketing, where something that sounds a bit strange when it's translated, it's not going to work. You know, it's not going to work at all. You know, so for example, I think it was HSBC they had a campaign, and it was translated, a marketing campaign, and it was translated incorrectly in some languages as the correct translation should have been assume nothing, and they actually said do nothing.
Oh.
So it was bad, and as a result of it being wrong, I think it cost them about $10 million to correct in 2019. So
wow,
there
are consequences to getting it
you
wrong.
know, and it's in this industry, you have a lot of responsibility, But whereas if this had been, you know, a user guide or a manual, the machine translation option would have been perfectly satisfactory. But in something where it's it's a very high profile event, a very high profile promotion, you don't want to take any chances, and it would have to be a translator, a human translator that did it and would understand all the nuances of the language to get it correct. So
right.
You know.
A really, really good example and a really good point. I think, again, the value of translation tends to be undervalued, which brings me to a question I had around Google Translate. So I'm sure some people listening are thinking, oh, I just put stuff in Google Translate and that's fine. I suppose it's useful for a certain, basic user. It depends on what you're looking to do. But what are some of the things to look out for when using a tool like Google Translate? You know, why would you want to go over and above that and actually get something properly translated as a business?
Sure. I mean, we have a lot of clients, and they'll sort of tell you to your face, you know, they're in the procurement department or whatever, and they'll say, oh, we've just run this through Google Translate just to get an idea of what we want for the tender. More or less, it's all right. Yeah, and that's fine. And in certain instances, we'll say, you know, sure, that's no problem. If they literally just need to understand the context of something, it has its place. But it can be very, very dangerous. So, you know, obviously it wouldn't be recommended for a legal document or for a contract, but in certain occasions it's more than sufficient. And also some languages are better than others, you know, things like French, Spanish are all right, German as well, the quality is pretty good. But then there's Asiatic languages where it just falls apart totally. And the same also with the neuro-machine translation softwares. I mean, companies like IBM, Amazon, Google are investing a fortune in this type of technology, and not Google has its own machine translation engines that are not Google Translate, the free option. You know, they're putting millions into developing very good neuro-machine softwares, and some of them work with some language combinations, some of them work with others, some of them are more geared to specific topics, specific fields, maybe more technical fields. So it's you know, there's lots of different factors in these things, and a lot of misunderstanding about it and about the technology. But you know, it has its place. If you quickly need to, you're at work, you're busy, quickly, it's a couple of sentences, then why not? You know, you'll know yourself if it's absolute nonsense or not in a business context. Well, you would hope you would, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You've actually reminded me about why we're called Dukaru. Now, if you're watching now or later across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you may or may not know this story, but the name Dukaru actually comes from my surname and my business partner's surname, Sarah Downs. So my surname is Otaru, and she's called Sarah Downs. And our original name was Dutaru. That's what we wanted to be called. Well, that's what we kind of agreed on. And I went off and did a little bit of due diligence, and I hold my hand up. I went to Google Translate. That's my hand up. And I put Dutaru just to make sure it didn't mean anything weird in any language, because Dutaru doesn't actually mean anything, right? But I put it in, and it meant dirty in Japanese. That's actually what came up. So I sent a screenshot to Sarah, and I said, I'm not sure we want to be called Dutaru. At least not this company, maybe a different company, but that's not what we're selling over at what we want to do. And that's where I kind of decided to take the T and turn it, and it looked like a Q, and I quite like the idea of having a name with a Q in it. And we ended up being called Dukaru. So yeah, there you go, a translation story. Translation is really important, and a number of companies, just staying on company names, that will be called something and it means something absolutely horrendous in another language. I think the due diligence around things like that is really important. Or in the case of HSBC, it's being translated wrongly. So I think the role of translation is, often undervalued. And I wondered if you could share, Fiona, how many translation services companies are there out there? How big are they, and how big is this marketplace?
Well, the market value is projected to be in the order of between 30 and 40 billion US dollars per year, as you touched upon earlier, with about a growth rate of about 3%. About 55% of the companies in the sector, translation agencies or localization service providers, as they're called in the US, those companies, about 55% of the companies are small companies, have in the order of about 10 people working for them, have a turnover up to around $1 million US dollars per year, anything from 100 up to $1 million US dollars. So more than 50% of the market is relatively small players. And then you have about 30% of the agencies are from the 1 to the 5 million. And then 10% of the agencies are from the 5 to the 25 million. And then you've got about 4% of agencies that are in the bracket from 25 up to 100 million US dollars, but they could be even it doesn't stop at 100 million. I mean, the top agencies in the world have got a higher turnover than that. I think it might be, I can't say exactly, but it could go as high as $500 million for one agency. So the market is quite fragmented, really, in some ways. But the big players are very interesting, because the big players are very clever because they specialize in the technology aspects of the business. So, for example, they will develop APIs for you, they'll develop connectors for you. A lot of their clients will be e-commerce clients. Right. So there'll be companies like Marks and Spencer's who will put on their website probably, it could be thousands of new items every single day, or possibly add product items, every hour in different languages, because they have several websites in different languages. So there they would combine the connector technology to connect the communications coming in from their client, and then they would maybe use machine translation to translate the product items, because often the product items are very similar in translation aspects, but they have responsibility for some world-leading companies, e-commerce platforms. So very, very impressive, but they're obviously at the very top end, and they have teams of developers who will develop bespoke connector systems for their clients, and manage their documentation management systems for manuals, also their artwork, everything. So it's more than just translation. It's about technology. It's about partnering with your client. It's a very, very close relationship in those with those top end companies.
Yeah, thanks for that, Fiona. I think that gives a really good idea of who is in the marketplace, and the sort of things that are used to differentiate between one type of company and another. If you're watching now or later and you want to put a comment through or a question, feel free to ask myself or Fiona or anything. I want to say hello to Omar, who is online, and Prasenjit, I hope I pronounced that properly, and Malkit, who's also commented. Thank you so much. That's over on LinkedIn. If you're watching on Facebook and you want to put a comment through as well, please feel free to do that. So I want to go on to what makes McFelder Translations tick? So what do you feel differentiates you as a business? Because you're quite a small business and you've got, some really big customers, and your translation is not just, marketing. You do a lot of technical translation, and kind of a lot of work with really big companies. You're trusted with, some really top kind of Fortune 500 companies out there. So tell us a little bit about what McFelder Translation does and what makes your company different from another kind of company doing a similar thing.
I think that we've always developed our USP as being specialising in technical translations, because that was the company director's backgrounds, and we had used translation companies in the past when we were, in product development or in global marketing. We had actually contracted out the services of translation agencies to translate websites as well as product literature, and in most cases we didn't have great experience because we were promoting technical chemical products and the agency didn't understand our products. The translators that they selected for the work didn't understand the products that we were selling, and then our teams in the respective countries would be revising it all and changing it all. And in the end, we just thought, what, is it really worth using a professional translation agency when we've got so much work to do internally to revise it all? So we felt that there was a niche in the market to understand what the clients want and to assign translators that really were a good fit, who really did understand the products, to understand the industry of the client. And I think that's where we've made our difference with our clients, that we understand what they do. They work closely with us also to, develop our understanding of their terminology, to understand the way they want to write things, not just the public domain information. And we partner with some amazing translators who, for example, if we're doing work on dental implantology, then the person translating would possibly be a dentist or someone who has definitely worked in that field, has got all the relevant experience and really understands what the client's about and what they're trying to achieve, as well as understanding the brand of the client, the importance of their brand, particularly if they're a world leader. And that's where we've created the niche for ourselves, because obviously we couldn't compete, with one of the leading companies in the world who have armies of developers. But we have developed a niche in terms of understanding more specialist sectors. So, we've worked in sectors such as welding and cutting, through to dental implantology, predictive maintenance software, pharmaceutical products. It's amazing because there's no limitation really, and there's business to consumer is not really our forte, and that's not something that we've really gone after. But we stay focused very much on these types of sectors, and our clients over the years have been very loyal, very faithful, and we've grown together. And as we've onboarded new technologies, this has helped our clients. We also have design facilities as well, so we can work with the artwork that I touched upon earlier. We're very comfortable with audio formats. So I think, it's you create a relationship with your clients. Our clients are very, very busy people. They need to have a safe pair of hands, and they have to have a supplier that they know that they can trust. And that's why it's come so well together for us, because it's really understanding that it's a partnership rather than just contracting out to any old supplier and, the cheapest person wins. It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah. And it sounds like with translation services that you're actually helping your client create assets within their business. You spoke earlier about, the more you translate, the more, I think using the technology, the more you translate, the more it improves how well it's translating and begins to kind of almost like learn from the work that it's doing. So it gets better and better every time. And this kind of learning creates an asset, doesn't it, for the client? And it makes sense that, you know, clients would be loyal to a good translation services company when they come across one that is good, that helps them to create that high quality translation across the organization in terms of internal communications, translating technical documents, marketing collateral, whether internal or externally, that they would, you know, they would stick to a good, you know, a good company that is helping them do this. In terms of the trends that you're seeing with the pandemic, what are you seeing around translation? Because you did mention that things have skyrocketed, obviously, because companies are doing far more translation. But can you talk a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the what we saw as the pandemic started was that more people, you know, were at home working. So to be honest, it was an opportunity for them to maybe sit down and create that brochure that they never had time to do before, and then have it translated for the European market, for example, or to really sit down and think about what they wanted in their new website, to start doing web work, or maybe create that video that they'd thought about for a long time but had never got round to. So as a result of the pandemic, we found that clients were being very innovative, that they were embracing things that maybe they wouldn't have done in the past, pushing things very much onto LinkedIn, doing webinars, engaging more with clients in that way. And they also wanted to have presentations ready, presentations in different languages, or maybe just selling online. They wouldn't normally have even had to consider doing that type of thing. And those are the things where we were brought in to enable them to speak to their global audience, not just be restricted to one language. So for us personally, there was a lot of new things happening, and certainly not a downturn in our project work at all.
Yeah, that's really good to hear.
Very fortunate, you know, very fortunate position. I think if our clients had been, for example, some agencies specialise in hotels. We do have hotel chains in Spain as clients, very good clients, very successful hotels. But, you know, there was nothing happening there. Also, if you had been very focused on tourism, on travel, some agencies have, you know, airlines are their big client, that type of thing, then, you know, they would have had a really different experience from us.
Yeah, they would have been impacted. And you touched on something, I know we spoke about this before, some of the benefits of translation. So we've said a few times that translation is often undervalued. But I remember when we were speaking, it was probably last week, you gave a really good example of a company spending, you know, a lot of money on the aesthetics of, you know, of something. Could be an exhibition or some kind of conference, but not being willing to spend that same amount of, I guess, investment on translation and some of the ramifications of that. So if there's a company looking at global growth right now, for instance, and they're looking at maybe going back to doing in-person events and so on, what would you say are some of the things that they need to be considering as far as communication goes, as far as reaching a global marketplace when it comes to translation?
I think that for translation, it's worth looking at, you know, certain things that can maybe be standardized that you can use. You don't have to translate everything. You can have, you know, certain items translated for certain markets. But it's very important that a native speaker, you know, a native translator does the translation, and that it sounds totally natural. You know, in the past, you know, certain companies have chosen to spend, you know, millions and millions of pounds attending events, attending exhibitions. So they've spent a lot of money on the stand, on the artwork, flying people all over the world, you know, doing great demos and all the rest of it. But then, you know, you pick up their brochure, you know, if it's in German, for example, and it's, you know, full of mistakes, you know, that just, you know, destroys your image, destroys your brand straight away compared to your competitor who may have had it done properly and professionally. Right. You know yourself how something looks if it's poorly written in English. you know, it's just, it's not good. And it's not a good way to try and save money. Let's put it like that. And you don't have to spend a fortune either. You can be very specific in what you do want to translate. Some companies choose to only have sections of their website translated because it would target that specific part of the market. You don't have to have the whole thing done or specific landing pages, but to know that it's done and it's done well makes all of the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
And, you know, ironically, the companies that we have as clients see it as an investment. And, you know, hey, maybe that is why they're world leaders, you know, because they do everything very, very well and very professionally, and they don't cut corners.
Yeah.
That's got to be, you know, there's got to be some sort of, you know,
yeah, absolutely. And they're seeing it,
you know?
Yeah, they're seeing it as an asset rather than, you know, rather than a cost. It's an investment for them. And that leads to my next question, actually, Fiona. So which industries do you work with? Because I know you're quite diverse in the sort of industries that you work with. So could you share some of the industries that you work with around translation?
Sure. Well, we work in oil and gas. We do different types of work within the sector. So we can, it could be legal documentation, it could be highly technical documentation, engineering documentation, it could be tender documents, that type of thing in that sector. We also work in manufacturing, we work in biotechnology, pharma, dental, a little bit in tourism and hotel chains, not so much. Welding is a very large sector for us. The steel industry is a very large sector. Softwares around biochemical instrumentation is a big sector for us as well. And another sector that's growing quite significantly is predicative software. So, for example, in a manufacturing site, they use this software to predict if they're optimizing their operations, if they're maybe using too much energy, just how the entire operation works and how it can be fine-tuned. So we have clients that develop that type of software, and then of course the software has to be localized for the different markets. So someone in China doesn't want it in English, for example. With all of our global clients, we often have to do internal communications because some clients may have more than 60,000 employees and they're not all based in Britain or the US or Australia. They don't all speak English. And companies want to obviously engage not just customers, but their own employees, of course. So it can be internal and external requirements.
Yeah. It's really good. Thank you for that. Do you have any, I guess, tips or advice for, you know, someone who is, you know, leading a business that is currently looking at global growth and is looking at a whole communications strategy? What are some, I guess, top tips and advice around how to make sure that that growth is inclusive and make sure that not just the staff and the customers, but the stakeholders are pulled in by communicating with them in a language that they prefer?
Well, it could be as simple as their website for the sales department, supporting the sales team with brochures. It could be webinars where interpreters can actually be used as well, if not everything is to be done in English. We also offer the service of a consultancy type service as well, because each business is different. Each project is different as well. So we like to talk to the client and really understand what they want and what they want to achieve before they spend any money whatsoever, and take it, you know, from there with them and understand what they want to make sure that they're not spending money just for the sake of it. So I think, you know, every client is different, and we really, you know, need to understand what their objectives are, and then, you know, work around that to make sure we assist to deliver that and to speak to whoever it is they want to speak to, either internally or externally.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having you here. For people listening now and later, how can someone get in touch with you, if they want to know more about what you do around translation and, you know, maybe get some advice or work with you, what's the best way to get in touch with McFelder Translation or yourself?
Well, the best way is really through my LinkedIn account, either myself, Fiona Feldermann, or McFelder Translations company account on LinkedIn. I think it's the easiest and most agile way to reach out.
Fantastic. So Fiona is active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with her, follow her, and put any questions to her in the chat or via LinkedIn messages. I want to thank everyone for watching. Next week, I'll be back next week with Gary Kemp, who is the owner of Doric Skateboards, and it promises to be a really exciting chat with him. So do stay tuned for that. If you're listening on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to our channel so that you get first-hand notifications around these lives, and follow us on Facebook, and of course follow me on LinkedIn, and also follow Dukaru. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you next week. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.